To be honest, I do agree this is the worst Genesis album, but I don't think it's a hot garbage album either. I think at worst, like there's a couple songs on this album that I think suck, but I don't think it's an absolutely abysmal record when you still got Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford playing their heart out on all the tracks. I have more problems with Ray, what's his name? Ray Wilson.
Ray Wilson.
Whatever Ray, I'll just call him Ray as a
Ray.
vocalist. I do believe he was a poor substitute after Phil Collins. But at the same time, there's a couple songs where I don't mind how he sounds on some of these songs.
Probably not.
Welcome back, music fans. Today we are going to be completing the Genesis series with the final album, Calling All Stations from 1997. And Jacob is here as always.
What's going on?
I don't know about you, Jacob, but I have kind of conflicting feelings. I'm excited to talk about the last Genesis album, but at the same time, it's like, is this really the one that we had to end out on?
I mean, we had "We Can't Dance" right there. That was especially that last song, "Fading Light." That
Oh,
was
that's a perfect way to end the Genesis
one song for
discography.
Genesis.
And then this. What in either way, I'm gonna kind of treat this like a bonus content episode almost because We Can't Dance is such a perfect way to end their discography. I had never listened to this album before this video, so it was interesting listening to it. I went in with high no, not high hopes, but I tried to go in with a very like no preconceptions because I've heard it was a really bad album. Like I'll try to give it a chance, but honestly, not really digging this album. It was a lot better than I thought it was going to be, but still not my favorite.
Yeah, like this album was a whole blind spot for me. I didn't know this album existed for the longest time. And I didn't realize Genesis tried to make music after Phil Collins left. So this was a weird album to listen to. And I had heard going in, many people are like, "This is the worst Genesis album. This is the worst Genesis album." And our friend Nick, he's like, "This is one of the worst albums of all time." I think he gives us a very low score, maybe a 0.5 out of 10. I think is what he gives
I
it. Very
think so.
low. And so I'm like, "Oh, is it really going to be that bad?" To be honest, I do agree this is the worst Genesis album, but I don't think it's a hot garbage album either. I think at worst, like there's a couple songs on this album that I think suck, but I don't think it's an absolutely abysmal record when you still got Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford playing their heart out on all the tracks. I have more problems with Ray, what's his name? Ray Wilson.
Ray Wilson.
Whatever Ray, I'll just call him Ray as a
Ray.
vocalist. I do believe he was a poor substitute after Phil Collins. But at the same time, there's a couple songs where I don't mind how he sounds on some of these songs. It's weird how that is. I do think what hurts this album is calling it a Genesis record. Because especially since you had two amazing lead vocalists, first Peter Gabriel and then Phil Collins, you follow that up with Ray, who doesn't have the same vocal chops as either Peter or Phil. and you're setting yourselves up for failure calling it Genesis. Maybe if this was a spin-off project with Tony and Mike with a different lead singer, I think this could have been a better received album, but as a Genesis album, I can see why this tanked.
Yeah, I agree. I've watched some footage of them doing live concerts from this time. They only did one tour with Mr. Ray as the lead vocalist. And I will say the big thing that hurts this album is calling it a Genesis album because if this was a side project, like you were joking and saying if they call it Exodus instead, since that's what comes after Genesis, uh, I would have liked this a lot better because there's some actually pretty good songs on here, and since I've been listening to a lot of '90s albums, like this is some pretty good '90s alt rock. Not gonna lie, but when you compare it to stuff like, you know, Foxtrot or Trick of the Tail, Selling England by the Pound, Invisible Touch, Duke, like it's nowhere near as good as that stuff. And Ray Wilson, I'm very sorry. He does a great job at the songs that he sings on this album, but I've seen some live footage of him singing some of the older Genesis songs. He does okay with the Peter Gabriel stuff, but he cannot do the Phil Collins stuff at all. He absolutely butchered Ripples, which is my favorite Genesis song. His Land of Confusion was atrocious. I think Tonight, 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 I think I heard him do that, and I thought that was awful. Like, it's not good. Get a sip of coffee there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get on in with track number one, Calling All Stations.
So, hearing this song, it did have more of a grungy feel to it. So, it's kind of interesting hearing Genesis try to go in that 90s style rock music that was popular at the time. It would have been interesting if Peter Gabriel adapted with the times because I don't know if I can't imagine with the way Phil Collins sings him doing that style of music. But it is kind of interesting they attempted to adapt with the times with the opening song. But immediately, as soon as I heard Ray's voice and him singing the way he does in that song, I'm like, yeah, this song sucks. It's like Tony Banks is like the saving grace on this album. Like every song on this album, he does some really cool keyboards, even on songs that are subpar, like this song. So I gotta say, shout out to Tony Banks, especially for trying to make this album tolerable at best. But this is a song where it's like maybe if Peter, I can imagine Peter Gabriel singing this song fine, but with the singer we got, I think this song
If you
sucks.
want to hear what a possible '90s Genesis would have sounded like, about this time, I think it was a few years later, but Genesis, all five of the original members got together and re-recorded Carpet Crawlers, and it was produced by Trevor Horn, who's the lead singer of the Buggles, the guy who did Video Killed the Radio Star, and the guy who produced Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes. They did a re-recorded version of Carpet Crawlers, but in like '90s style, and Phil and Peter trade off on the vocals, and it's amazing. Like if they would have done an album like that, it'd have been a lot better than this.
Oh wow.
Maybe
But
something to check out after the video. Oh, it,
but yeah, I'm not a fan of this one.
no. Um, so for me, I have some mixed feelings on this because it gets going at the beginning with the guitar and the keyboard and the drums. Oh, but by the way, I had to look up like who's playing the drums because Phil Collins isn't on here, and they had to get two different drummers for this album. Um, I was kind of digging the instrumental at the beginning, and then Ray starts singing. I'm like, oh, really? It's like this is the guy you get to replace Phil Collins. Like, I mean, he's all right, but like, he's not really in the same league as the other singers in this band. Um, the song itself was pretty good. I just feel like they should have got a different singer to do it. It's an okay song. Our second song is going to be Congo.
I thought this song sucked. I did not care for this song at all. Uh, a lot of it has to do with Ray's vocals again. It just sounded very subpar, bland, and like, why are we singing about vacationing in the Congo? Like, this is too cheesy, even in Genesis standards. I don't even think Phil Collins could have pulled this one off. It's like, take me to the Congo, let me free. I'm like, what is this song? This is one of the biggest duds on this album, I thought.
Well, I like this song a lot more than you did, but it's by no means one of my favorite Genesis songs. It still ranks near the bottom. But as far as this album goes, it was one of the ones I liked a bit more. I thought the melody was catchy for the time, and this is the biggest problem I have with this album is that a lot of the songs, they were good for the time I was listening to them, but as soon as I ended the album, I was like, I don't remember a thing I've heard on this album. So that's my problem. Also, I may or may not have actually fallen asleep while listening to this album. So
That's not a good sign.
no. The third track is called Shipwrecked.
All right, so this is one of the songs on this album that I actually really liked. I thought a song like this, which is a slower ballad, would actually fit Ray's vocals. He actually sang pretty decent on this song. I actually like the themes of isolation and loneliness. I thought that was very relatable. Uh, there's some good keyboards on this again from Tony Banks. And I thought, while not a top tier song, this one I actually thought was a pretty solid 90s ballad sung by an artist who actually was able to fit his vocal chops on. Maybe not a great Genesis song, but on its own, I'm like, yeah, I actually like this one. This one's in my top three.
I agree, this is one of the best songs on the album. This is a good 90s alt rock ballad. But once again, whenever you're calling it a Genesis song, that kind of lessens it for me. Like if this was by a different band, it's like, oh, Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks of Genesis uh formed this other band. I'd have loved this song. I'd have loved honestly all three of the songs we talk about, but you call it a Genesis song and it's like, no. So again, it's a good song. It's just not Genesis, in my opinion. And I mean, you could pull the argument that like Genesis had to change with the times when Phil Collins became the lead singer, and they're changing again. This part of their evolution. I get that, but it's like I don't know. This feels a little too far off from what they were doing. I mean, at
Yeah,
least if they'd at least had Peter Gabriel or Phil Collins and done the same style, I'd have been a bit more open to it. But I don't
yeah.
know.
Because at least when Phil Collins became the lead singer, the shift in their sound felt natural. Like A Trick of the Tail felt like a good continuation from Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and they kept growing from there to where they got to with We Can't Dance. This album just felt like you had We Can't Dance, and then you got Calling All Stations Here, and it's like,
I think it's because this came out 6 years after We Can't Dance. 6 years is that's a long time. Because I'm pretty sure that Phil had those solo records like both sides of the story and Dance into the Light, and he was focused on that, and people were like, "Oh, that's why there's not a new Genesis album because Phil Collins is focusing on a solo career." But then the news comes out, "Hey, Phil Collins isn't in Genesis anymore," and that's when they come out with the next Genesis record. Track four is Alien Afternoon.
yeah, this is another song that I thought was terrible. Uh, I will say I like the bass part on this song. Mike Rutherford comes in on a couple of tracks and he works his magic, and that's like the highlight on this song is there's a cool bass riff. But the rest, it's like I don't like the vocal delivery. This song goes on way too long. I think it's like the second longest song on the album, and I thought it was so boring. So I don't have much to add. This one was really lame in my opinion.
I actually kind of like this one. I thought that it was kind of experimental and different, and I liked that about it. I liked that it was trying to be different. Still not like amazing, but I kind of got what they were going for on this one. I actually liked it. Number five, Not About Us.
Not about us. So we're back to the almost acoustic style ballad. This is another one that I thought fit Ray's vocals. I actually did like the chorus on this song. Not amazing by any means, but it is one of the better songs on this album. This one made my top five.
I actually loved this song. This is the only song I can say about on the album that I actually really liked. That being said, this would have been a million times better if Phil Collins would have sung it. And I wonder if this song was written more for Phil Collins. I don't know if it was an earlier one. Because you have that acoustic guitar at the beginning, which the last time I think Genesis used an acoustic guitar was, back in the days of Steve Hackett. Um, so I thought that was interesting. But just listening to it the whole time, I was like, A, this is a good song, but B, if Phil Collins was singing right now, this would be even better. Because this was a nice little 90s, almost kind of adult contemporary style ballad with the uh, kind of features the acoustic guitar more than usual in Genesis, or at least not since like the 70s. But I actually really enjoyed this song, and I might start listening to this particular song. If there's anything I pulled away from this record, it's going to be this song. So, number six, If That's What You Need.
And now we're back to crap again. This I thought was the blandest song on the whole album. If that's what you need, oh, that's what I'm here for.
You actually remember what the chorus sounds
You
like?
need. Oh, yeah, because I thought it was so surface level of lyrics. It reminded me of that song that came out when I was growing up, where it's like, if I could and I would, I'd go wherever you will go. I'm like, we're going that levels of cringy bland. It's like, if you need this, I'll do this. And it's like, that's some very shallow lyrics there. That and what's that one pop song in the 70s? You Light Up My Life. That's like one of the most annoyingly bland, cringiest songs I've ever heard. So I probably put it in that level. Not as bad as Alien Afternoon, but I thought this was a very lackluster song.
So I was getting on to some of the songs on We Can't Dance for being a little too bland, but that was just in, comparatively. Those songs are like the Eric Clapton one, the one about Eric Clapton's son, and the one about like the dieting or whatever, the ones that I didn't like as much, like those are a bazillion times better than the worst songs on these on this album here. This one here, I don't remember none of it. Like when you were singing that, I was like, "Oh, that's what that song sounds like." Like I was very tired when I listened to this album, and I actually fell asleep while listening to it. I do remember listening to each of the songs. It was kind of like half asleep, but I just remember listening to this and thinking like, how am I going to remember this for the review? And that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign whenever you can't remember your stuff. Like
And I listened to this album twice, and I feel the same way about all of these songs.
this is not an album that I'm going to be returning to very often, if at all. Like, I mean, I can see myself listening to Not About Us every once in a while, but when you've got other albums like, Invisible Touch, Duke, Trick of the Tail, Selling England by the Pound, stuff like that, like why would I waste my time with this when I could be listening to that, you know? Um it's really funny. Uh there's one more song that I actually like on this album, and it's the next one. Track 7, The Dividing Line. But after this song, everything else is forgettable.
The Dividing Line. Yeah, the dividing line. I really like this one. This one is in my top three. A lot of it is Tony Banks. His like synthy keyboard riff is awesome. Something like that. But I thought it was the highlight on this whole song. And even though this is one of the longer tracks on the album, I love the production on this thing. I can just imagine how much better this song would have been if Phil Collins sung it. Like if this was on like Invisible Touch or Abacab or some of their 80s albums, I would have been like, this would have been an amazing Genesis song. And actually, out of all the songs on this album, there's like two songs on this album that are the closest to feeling like legit Genesis songs. This one is one of them. Even with Ray on it, I'm like, this is a really, really good song. I love the production on it.
So at the beginning, I thought this was going to be an instrumental song just because of how amazing the instrumental was at the beginning with Tony Banks doing his keyboard thing. But
Yeah,
then Ray,
I did too because it was like 2 minutes of instrumental, and I thought it was gonna be like if it like when we were getting when I first heard this album when we got to the instrumental or when I thought it was gonna be an instrumental, I'm like, watch the instrumental be the best song on this album.
but when he started singing, I was like, oh, I almost kind of wanted this to be an instrumental when he started singing.
Yeah.
Because the keyboard part is definitely my favorite part of this song. This is in my top three as well. I this is one that I might listen to every now and again. Is pretty good. Now we're gonna get into track number eight, Uncertain Weather.
This is the other song that I was mentioning of the one of two tracks that I think feel like Genesis songs. This one kind of feels like it could have come from the Peter Gabriel era. I really like that about it. I liked the ominous mood of the song, the atmosphere surrounding it. It almost could have been a prog rock song with the way the song was arranged with the production and everything. I even liked Ray's higher register on this song, like when he like in the chorus where he does it. I'm like, okay, he actually sounds pretty good on this song. I actually think this is his best vocals on the album. I thought this was a really good ballad with a lot of great atmosphere surrounding it. I thought lyrically this song was interesting. This is one of my favorite songs on the album.
I don't remember it.
Oh, really?
You saying that maybe I should give this one another listen, but for the moment right now I don't remember it, so can't really say much about it, which is honestly what I'm going to say about the remainder of the songs on this album because there's really nothing to these last songs on this album. Um, that being said, track number nine, Small Talk.
Small Talk actually made my top five. I thought this one was one of the. I actually thought this song was kind of an earworm when I heard it. Uh, I thought this had some good keyboards on it. There's actually some good harmonies on this track that I liked, and it's weird saying that because Genesis usually isn't a harmony band, but there is some good harmonies on this track. And this is another one where I didn't mind Ray's vocals on it. So there's like five songs on this album that I recommend. So this is one of them.
Once again, this is another boring song on this album, which I don't usually say that. I usually try to say at least something about a song. Even if I don't like it, I try to say why I don't like it. I cannot say anything about this song. That's how just bland this is. This most of this album is like the definition of just mediocre, honestly. I mean, Tony Banks's keyboard playing is always good, but the rest of it is just like eh. Uh track 10. There must be some other way.
Um, this one, I like the chorus. I love the keyboards. I think it's an okay track. I don't think it should have been 7 minutes long though. That's my one hiccup with this song. I think if you had brought it down to like 3 or 4 minutes, and I think this could have been a hit song for them, honestly. This one had potential, but I think it was just a little too bloated for its own good.
It's all right. It's all right. Nothing really stood out to me on this one either. Okay, well, here we go. It's the grand parade of lifeless packaging. I mean, the grand album closer, or the grand closer to Genesis's discography, One Man's Fool.
Ooh. It's weird calling this the last Genesis track when you got Fading Lights. That would have been a better final song.
Fading Lights is the real last Genesis song, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought this song was terrible. Like, again, I like the production on it, but this song was a chore to get through. I cannot tell you anything about this song. This song is close to 9 minutes long. You know it's bad when Supper's Ready has like an extra like 13 minutes of song than this song, and yet this song feels longer than Supper's Ready. Like that is embarrassing. I don't remember anything about this song. I thought this was a very bad closer for the legacy of Genesis. But calling this a Genesis song is again kind of a stretch because it doesn't really feel like one.
So, again, this is just boring, but they're drawing out the boring. Like, stuff like Supper's Ready, Return of the Giant Hogweed, Ripples, um, Cinema Show, like I'll gladly sit through the extended runtime of those songs because they're actually doing something with those songs. This song was like 9 minutes of nothing. It's like I'd almost rather listen to 9 minutes of silence because that's about the same that I'm gonna get out of this song. And I hate saying that about a Genesis song, Genesis quotation marks. I hate saying that about a Genesis song because like they're such a good band, but this album like they really just kind of hit a low point here. Like from Genesis to Revelation is better than this album. And you know what I said about that album.
Yeah, I would agree with that, primarily because Peter Gabriel's on that album.
Yeah. At least Peter Gabriel is a better singer than Ray Wilson, and you get stuff like In the Wilderness and Fireside Song. Like this like Not About Us and Dividing Line are I don't know. They're good, but they're just all right. I'm ready to go ahead and get on with this. What a way to end our Genesis series. What a letdown. We could have stopped at We Can't Dance, Genesis. Man, it's been a good series. We'll end it on a high note though. I'll kind of go through like a highlight and kind of just talk about the band as a whole after we're done with this so that we can actually end on a high note, unlike the band. Actually, well, the band did reunite with Phil Collins and they went on a tour in 2007 with Phil Collins, and I watched videos of it. That looks like a really cool tour. Even though they were a bit older, they still could play. Like Phil Collins could still drum really well. The band was still in top condition, and they had a killer set list too. Man, you can watch the 2007 tour. I think there's like a DVD of it that you can watch. That's like them live in Rome 2007. But then later on, like just a few years ago, they did their last tour called the Last Domino Tour, and that was kind of sad to watch because Phil Collins was in a chair the whole time. He couldn't drum and he lost his voice. It was sad to watch, but at the same time, they did it for the fans because they wanted to just get on stage one more time just so the fans could see him one last time. The three of them perform together. But before we can get to the end, top five songs on this album, if you can make a top five.
I actually can make a top five because the songs that I put in my top five are actually songs I put on my Genesis playlist. So these are the five songs that I actually enjoyed on this album. Number five, Not About Us. Number four, Small Talk. Number three, Shipwrecked. Number two, The Dividing Line. And number one, Uncertain Weather.
Number five, Alien Afternoon. Number four, Calling All Stations. Number three, Shipwrecked. Number two, Dividing Line. And number one, Not About Us. Now, here's where I'm looking forward to. Um, What's gonna be your number or your what? Let me start over. What is gonna be your score out of 10 on this?
A score.
I think you froze.
Yeah, yeah. I
What's gonna
think
be
you
your
froze
score?
too.
Okay. What's
Okay,
gonna be your score out of 10?
my score for this album.
You froze again.
Well, I guess that Banks is killing it even on the worst songs on this album. But most of this album I thought was mediocre at best. There's a couple of songs I thought were terrible. And Ray Wilson is not a good substitute for Phil Collins. There's a lot of negative things going against it. If this was not a Genesis album, I probably would have given this a slightly higher score than what I'm going to give it. But as a Genesis album, I thought it was pretty lackluster. The best I can give this album is a 5 out of 10.
I want to give this album a 5 out of 10 because 5 is the definition of mediocrity, but we got Not About Us on this album, so I'll give it a 6. I'm feeling a little generous. I'm gonna give it a 6, but most of this album is the textbook definition of 5 out of 10. I feel like 5 out of 10s are almost worse than 1 out of 10 albums because at least 1 out of 10 albums, like, you can have fun making fun of them. This, I can't have fun making fun of this album just because it's so bland.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought Congo was kind of an embarrassing song. I'm going to be honest.
A little bit. Okay, so that's it. That's the discography of Genesis. Let's end this on in a good way because that album was atrocious. So I can remember way back whenever we did our video on Genesis to Revelation. When did we do that?
That
I'm gonna
was
so about a year ago, I think. Let me see if I can pull up exactly when it was. Do, do, do,
it was
do.
sometime a year ago.
Um, there it is from Genesis to Revelation, March 19th, 2024.
Oh, wow.
Was it really March 19th? I feel like it was earlier than that. Yeah, it was March 19th. Okay, so it's a bit it hasn't been a year yet. I feel like it was February for some reason. So we got through Genesis in under a year, but I remember starting it. We started it on my secondary YouTube channel, which
Wasn't
was
even
not very long
existing.
running. Not very long running at all because I figured out like why do I have two YouTube channels? That's just confusing. So I just moved all the videos over to my main one, and now the other one I retitled it to SoundLab Studio Studio 2, but anybody who was watching back in the day knows it was Scrap Dog Scott's Records, and you remember that awful theme song that I
Oh,
wrote
I
for.
know. I still love that. Break those cuts. Break those. Break those cuts. Break
I
those.
was using that stupid green screen and putting myself into music videos. And I did that on an old 2000s video camera too, because that's when I was going through my cell phone flip phone phase. I didn't have an iPhone at that time.
Oh,
So it looked all janky. I think my favorite one was the one where I was in the Smells Like Teen Spirit video, and I literally was just holding my guitar just going. It was just like 2 seconds, but
and you put yourself in the I Can't Dance video, like doing the dance
doing
moves.
the no. I think the cheesiest one is when I was in Weezer's Buddy Holly music video, and like I tried to play do 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 do. That's literally what that video was me making a goofy face trying to play do do do. I think I got one where it was like me next to Slash in the November Rain video.
Yeah.
That was probably my favorite editing bit of that. The one where I was in the Rick Astley video with the Never Gonna Give You Up and I was doing like the dance was awful. Oh my gosh.
Those were some memories right there.
Yeah, that channel was that channel was a little off, I'll say. I was going through some stuff at the time, and I don't know, I was not myself then. So I was doing all this weird stuff. And you remember that first video I made where it was just weird. That first video I made for that channel, I've tried to erase that video from.
Oh, where he did all those skits and stuff.
Yeah, that was. Why would I do that? Was so dumb. Why would I do that?
I think you were trying to do a self-produced variety show.
Yeah, but it wasn't funny and it was just cringy. Like super cringy. Because I was trying to, I remember, I would like talk to the camera and I was thinking like, this is like a weird mix of Steve from Blue's Clues and Mr. Rogers. And I'm like, why would I do that?
A beautiful day in the scrapyard, a wonderful
So
day
I would
in
be
the
like, oh
scrapyard.
look,
Went you find
we
my clue?
I would be like, look, we have a videotape that was sent from the trippy hippie. Let's go put it in our obsolete box. And I look back on that now and I'm like, what the heck? Like, that's so weird. Why would I do that?
Well, you did it.
I was trying to get viewers, I guess, by being cringe, but thankfully that video was. I mean, I have it backed up, but you can't find it on YouTube anymore. I don't want people seeing that. I'm embarrassed of that video. But the Genesis series from that channel lives on here on Sound Live Studios, thankfully. Whenever we did that first Genesis to Revelation video, I remember being kind of bored through half of it because I'm like, half these songs aren't very interesting. I was thinking like, is this series really going to take off? But then whenever we did Trespass and we were talking about like White Mountain and uh, The Knife
Hey,
and
good.
you really like those songs. I'm like, you know what? Maybe Jacob is actually gonna like Genesis because I had no idea what you were gonna think about Genesis.
Well, I know, like going in, I think I remember saying something along the lines like I knew all the big hits, but like the Peter Gabriel era was a full-on blind spot. So there was a lot of first time listens from Genesis, and there's some people that divide Genesis in two halves, like you could either love one end or the other. And now hearing the entire discography, I can say with full confidence, both ends are good in their own right. Peter Gabriel had some cool stuff, and there's some great instrumentation when Genesis was more prog. All the members had a chance to shine musically on a lot of these albums. But there's some cool stuff with Phil Collins too. And Phil Collins dabbled into the prog early on. Trick of the Tail's a great album. Then there were three, another good one. And then when they shifted in a more mainstream direction, beginning with Duke and Abacab, they still did some really cool stuff and they still experimented, but in a more mainstream way without losing the integrity of their sound.
Exactly.
And even though, Invisible Touch is the quote unquote sellout album, I can see why that was the big album with all the big hits because those are some great songs. So I'm like, you can enjoy both. I mean, I'm because Phil Collins, I think, is a better singer. That's just my opinion. I lean more towards Phil Collins, like that era. And I think most of my favorite Genesis albums that are in my top five are Phil Collins. I think there's one Gabriel album in my top five,
I think I know which one that is.
and
That's a good one.
there's a couple of them that are in the top 10 from Gabriel. But I'm more of a Phil Collins guy personally, but I'm still not going to deny how good of an era Peter Gabriel was. I mean, there were still some great albums under him: Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. As weird of an album as that is, with the
Sometimes you just need to forget about the story and just enjoy Tony Banks going ham on the keyboard, you know?
yeah, like even with the snake stuff and the
No, that song I'm too
people.
focused on Steve Hackett's guitar solo at the end.
Yeah, that one took me two listens to appreciate. Like I remember when I first listened to it, I was like, there's some cool stuff on it, but it's too weird and too abstract. But then you were the one that recommended, oh, there's a Lamb Lies Down Explained video. And that helped a lot because it did a good job of visualizing the story that's in the album. And then that mixed with the stuff I already liked on the album, I'm like, you know what? This is a really good Genesis album.
What's really great about this band is I feel like most of their albums have been my favorite album by them at some point. I can definitely say Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, um, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Trick of the Tail, Duke, Abacab, and Invisible Touch have all been my favorite Genesis album at some point in my life. It keeps switching.
To be honest, with the exception of maybe the first and last album, I can see any Genesis album being somebody's favorite.
Yeah.
Even
It's
albums I wasn't as big on, like some that are lower on the ranking for me, are albums like "Selling England by the Pound" and "Wind and Wuthering." I'm sure somebody can make a good defense why that's their favorite Genesis album, and I could respect that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Selling England by the Pound a bit higher because of stuff like Cinema Show and Dancing with the Moonlight Night, Firth the Fifth, stuff like that. That's it. That concludes our Genesis album review series. Do you have any final words just to kind of end the series here?
Well, first off, thank you, Scott, for encouraging me to check out all the Genesis albums. I can see why they're a favorite band of yours, and now going for their discography, they're a favorite band of mine. I definitely appreciate them a lot more. I mean, I already loved the Phil Collins era, but now I like the Peter Gabriel era as well. And I appreciate both sides of the coin, the proggy, the poppy. Just some great stuff all around. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you guys for watching. We are not done yet though, because I'm pretty sure pretty soon we'll be going through the albums of Mr. Phil Collins. So we'll want to see you back for that, the solo albums of Phil Collins. Until then, remember, music is art and art is expression.